Hi there and welcome to the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss and I'll be joined by Jonathan Fadugba a little bit later. But we're going to start off this episode with another great interview as we welcome to the show the Mjøndalen manager Vegard Hansen. So in the second part of the show we're going to talk about the general relegation battle. Molde are now the champions of Norway. And so we're going to get a little bit of a reaction from that later. But let's kick things off with this interview. And on this edition of the Nordic Football Podcast, I'm delighted to be joined by somewhat of a legend in Norwegian football, the Mjøndalen manager Vegard Hansen. Thanks very much for joining us on the show, Vegard. I hope you're well today.
I'm good, thank you. I'm not really a legend, but thank you for your kind words.
Well, I mean, some people might disagree with that, but certainly a man who's been in charge of a club for 13, 14 years, I think is a legend in my eyes. But Vegard Hansen is at Mjøndalen, who are in the Eliteserien, and at the moment fighting bravely against relegation. Have you enjoyed the season so far, Vegard? I know, it's been challenging, but being back in the top flight, I'm sure you've enjoyed it as well.
At least part of it. We were up in 15 as well and got relegated from a poor season, only got 21 points. So this season we have been doing better, but still we're down there, second from bottom, and it's challenging, as a coach and trainer and working so hard with the club for so many years. It's tiring to struggle at the bottom of the league. So we had some good games. We only had four victories, but we haven't lost too many games. We have a lot of draws. So we're fighting all we can to stay up. And if we stay up, it's been great. If we go down, the season will be terrible, So it's all about staying up in the league and be able to play in the Premiership or Eliteserien, as it's called, for next season as well.
Okay, so for those listeners who aren't aware, a brief history of Vegard Hansen. You played in Norwegian football many games, a lot of them actually for arch rival down there, Strømsgodset. We'll talk about that rivalry a little bit later. But you started managing Mjøndalen in 2006, I do believe. I think you were player manager then. And that was in the fourth tier of Norwegian football. You had two promotions in 3 seasons, and then the majority of your coaching career has been in the what is now the relegation. You gradually improved your ranking, and then that famous promotion in 2014 when you beat the mighty Brann over a 2-legged playoff match. You couldn't stay up that year, but you've been building again back up to the Eliteserien. I just wondered, Vegard, what did you learn from that campaign?
Yeah, we learned a lot in many aspects. Signing players, we didn't have a clue what kind of players to sign for the top league. We never paid an agent 1 krone in fee, so that meant they never offered us any good players. So we didn't manage to strengthen the team. We got 3 players in. They were all mostly substitutes. So we stuck with the team that got us up, with a surprise win against Brann, as you told already. So the team was more or less the same. We were quite naive, playing 4-4-2 with high pressure, like kick and run, more or less, long throw-ins, free kicks, corners, working hard for every point. And we started well. I think we got 13 points or something from the first 8 games, but then we didn't win a game for many weeks, and the team was just not good enough. So in that aspect we learned how to get better players, and we have started to pay agents a little bit to get better players, and that was one of the things. And we gambled on 2 important spots. We gambled on the goalkeeper spot. We were terrible. The goalkeeper lost his head early in the season, conceding 2 goals from corner and free kick from the corner as well. So after that, Ivar Forn, he lost his confidence and was very shaky for the rest of the season. That was a major problem for us, conceding a lot of goals, and the second goalkeeper was not good enough either. So in the 2 most important maybe spots in the team, goalkeeper and striker, we were poor. We didn't we trusted on the striker as well, and he didn't manage to score at the highest level. So that team was just not good enough. That was the main thing. And this season the team was better. We as a club was more prepared to play at the top level, and I think we've shown that. Even though we second from the bottom, the team is stronger. We're stronger compared to the rest of the clubs.
You've coached obviously quite a lot of seasons in the Obos-ligaen. How big is the difference between the Eliteserien and the Obos-ligaen? Is there a big golfing class, would you say?
Well, I think the difference maybe not that big anymore. It was the difference was bigger a few years ago, I think. If you see the cup results now, I think the top teams of the Obos-liga and the bottom clubs in the Eliteserien are quite similar. You know, the top teams of Obos now with Ålesund getting promoted and Sandefjord, there's very strong teams, and Star as well are good. So the Eliteserien and Obos-liga, all the clubs there are working very hard. So I think the difference is not as big as earlier. And you see Ranheim last year was doing very well. Kristiansund and all the small clubs are doing well in the Eliteserien, and we hope to do well as well this season, but we're not there just yet.
Yes, I mean, obviously Mjøndalen, it's you're not the biggest club in terms of resources. If you could survive this year, how massive would that be for finances and potentially to build for the future?
Well, it's very important, I have to say. You know, the pressure is on us now more than in 15, because that season no one believed us to stay up, and it was not a shock for anyone to go down again. But this season, and last season as well, in Mjøndalen, they earlier in the 1980s, this was a major club in Norway, because the money wasn't that important. So Mjøndalen has a culture and history for doing well. But then when the money came into Norwegian football, start of 1990 and later, then the club got relegated and was, as you said, at the 4th tier. But now we built, and when we grow stronger, the expectations are getting stronger as well, and people expected more from us in Norway and in Mjøndalen as well. So going up last season was expected and wanted a lot, and for us staying up now is also expected. So for us going down now will be very damaging for us as a club and for everyone, and the disappointment will be very big. And the budget now is almost 40 million. When we were up last season, last time it was only, I think, maybe half of this. So it's a big difference. The club is bigger. Stadium is growing. We're building. So to stay up now is very, very important for us.
Yes, let's talk about tactics actually now. And the last time you were in the Eliteserien, you often used a 4-4-2 formation, or certainly 2 guys up front. It seems that in the last year or two, you've switched to more sort of 4-3-3 quite a lot, 4-1-4-1. There's not, you're not exactly the same every week like Ranheim are or someone, but you seem to have switched from that 2 men up front. Is there a particular reason for that?
Yeah, you're right. We played the 4-4-2 for many years, and we have a player called Christian Gauseth, who's a very good player, but he's slow. He's a central midfielder, and in 4-4-2 we were outrun. He's too slow, and we didn't manage to close the gaps in front of the centre halves. So actually, the season before we got promoted last year, in the summer, we were 2-0 down against Start in Kristiansand. and we were changing from 4-4-2 to 4-5-1. And from that on until now, we have we stopped more or less conceding goals. Unfortunately, we stopped scoring goals as well, but we stopped losing, and that was strong enough to get us up last year. So we've done the same thing this season. We wanted to have a little higher pressure. We worked on that in the winter, but our centre halves didn't manage to cope with the spaces to cover. So we were finding it hard to keep a clean sheet, and we're conceding too many goals, and we had to do something. And before Molde game, we knew their strengths. They're very strong attacking, many good players attacking, with a lot of players coming into spaces between the centre halves and midfield, and we needed to close them down. So what we did was to mark Berg, the deep midfielder. We were marking one of the centre halves. We were expecting Mulder to play. If Mulder was playing, then we would mark him and let the other guy have the ball. Now he was injured, so we did more or less the same, but we marked the deep midfielder. We let one of the centre halves travelling with the ball. When he passed the halfway line, we were putting pressure from the side from the top striker, and Gauseth as a second striker was taking care of Berg as a deep midfielder. And then we're marking out the running midfielder on the side of the ball, and we're in control of the other midfielder as well. And we're marking 1-against-1 the wingers with our fullback. When their fullback were coming, and they both did, they came all the time, then our wide midfielder had to mark him as well. So we got away a little bit from the zone principle, and we're marking a lot more. And we succeeded quite well. We were lucky at the start of the game, but after a while, I think we were in better control, and we could have snatched the win as well at the end, actually. So that was what we wanted to do that game, and we thought it was quite good. I involved the players a lot, and they liked the way, the little change. Yeah. And we want to do the same thing against Sarpsborg. We did the same thing against Odd now. But we had to develop the offensive part of the game, and I think we did against Odd now. We played better. We created a lot more chances. We could have won the game. We were 2-1 up, 12 minutes from the end. So we built on that, and we all like the change, and we seems to be stronger offensively, and we can defend quite well. So this is how we will play the last games, I think.
Yeah, so let's just talk some statistics here and possession. You average the lowest ball possession in the Eliteserien with 43.3%. However, you are in the expected goal list. You're as high as 11th, which is very respectable. And it seems to me that really what you're looking to do with the ball is quality over quantity. For example, you actually have the best crossing accuracy in the whole of the Eliteserien out of any club. 40.2% crossing accuracy, which is very good. In terms of the ball possession, are you quite happy to let certainly some of the bigger teams have the ball against you, and you look to counter-attack?
Well, we would actually like to have the ball more, but we just have to accept that Molde away, we will not be able to have the ball a lot all the way as well, even though I don't think all this just as strong as Molde, but still, those kind of teams, they do not accept us to have the ball, at least when they play at home. So we just have to defend deep, and we have to know how the game is going to be, and we knew, I know Norwegian football very well, and I know what the game will look like, and if we put high pressure on a team like Molde, we will be killed. So that was not an option for us, and we accept to stay deep, but we do not have the counter-attack strength as I would like to have. You know, we had Amal Pellegrini before. We could have needed him now for counter-attack. We do lack a little bit of pace offensively, but we have worked on it, and we were better last game, I think. And the way we play now, Christian Gaus is a good player. He can handle the ball better than most of the players in Norway, and we use him in that gap between the striker and the midfield, and we tried to find him, and we did that a lot against Odd. And we have a right-footed left midfielder and a left-footed right midfielder. They come in as well, and we have very quick and players who like to run on the fullbacks, and Vetle and Sel, they will come when the wide midfielders come in, and that's what we want to do, to find them into space behind the opponent, and they are mostly the players who put the crosses in.
Okay, yes, it's let's talk about some of your players now, and you actually have the fourth oldest squad in the Eliteserien, average age of 27.6. For those who are interested, it's yet again it's Brann who have the oldest average squad, nearly averaging 30 years old now. Actually, Brann seems to go up year by year. But yes, you've got players like Olivier Ushian, Christian Gosset, Stian Asmundsen, Fredrik Brustad. I mean, these are guys that are experienced, you know, certainly at Eliteserien level. You must have quite a very strong dressing room there, a very professional dressing room, who you've got a lot of guys who set a strong example, I guess.
Yeah, you're right. The captain, Christian Gosset, he's been here for many years. He's a character in Norwegian football, and is controversial in his way. He wants to be that way, and he's not like a Mjøndalen guy through and through, but he knows the culture, and he's a good leader for the players. He's the boss of the players, and he's my right hand as well. He's a good friend of mine, and we work well together, and that's the secret. And it has always been in Mjøndalen. We have a very strong dressing room, strong relationship between the coaches and Kenneth as a leader as well, and the players. It's a family club, and that's very important for us. So even though some of the players are quite old and being experienced, the players being many big clubs better than Mjøndalen, they all know the culture and they accept how we work. And I never had any problems with any of all the players. They're very good guys, and they work well, and that's why we sign them. If they do not work well, if they are selfish or do not think of the team above themselves, then they will not be here for a long time. So I'm very happy with the players the way they are. But some of them were better players 10 years ago, you know, like Olivier Ocean. He's been good for us this season as well, but you know, he's been with a lot better clubs, and he's 37, I think, and you know, he will not have many years left, but he's still okay.
Yes. Now you mentioned in 2015 you had goalkeeper problems, and heading into this year you also had problems in between the sticks because of an injury crisis, and you ended up signing Julian Feierlund on loan from Rosenborg. Now I have to say this is a goalkeeper that's really impressed me this year. A fine young talent. How far do you think he can go in the game? Because he's certainly impressed this year for you, hasn't he?
Yeah, actually, I was a little bit, you know, nervous about him because we played against him when he was with Levanger for 2 seasons, and he conceded a lot of goals, and he was talented, but not ready for even maybe Obos. So I spent a lot of time making my mind up, but then we gambled, and we tried him and another young goalkeeper from Molde, both young, exciting goalkeepers. But Julian, you know, is under 21 national player for Norway, and with Rosenborg we were quite we trusted Rosenborg, but they signed him for long terms, and we thought he would be good enough for us. So he came here as a young player, not been playing Eliteserien at all, more or less. So he was not at his best when he came, but I think he has developed a lot during the season, and in the last months he's been outstanding. He has a strong head, strong character, good reflexes, good on the ball with his feet, and very willing to train. So no doubt he's going to be a very good goalkeeper. He's already, but he's going to be better, and probably a national goalkeeper for Norway within a few years.
Yeah, only 20 years old as well, which I mean, for a goalkeeper, that's very young, isn't it? For someone to show what he's done so far, I think it's certainly very impressive. Let's actually talk about rivalries now, Vegard. And a few weeks ago, we had the Sarpsborg player Amin Askar come on the show, and he was talking about the rivalry between Sarpsborg and Fredrikstad. He called it bigger than Lillestrøm Vålerenga, and you, in an interview earlier in the year in the press, called the Ælv Classico between Strømsgodset and Mjøndalen potentially bigger than that clash as well. This is a very regional derby, isn't it? I think only 10 minutes between the two cities or towns. And, I mean, you're a man, you were born in Drammen, I do believe. You know what it means to the fans, to the people. Just how big is this rivalry, and how pleased are you that you got 4 points off Strømsgodset this year?
Well, the rivalry is massive, I have to say. You were partly right. Mjøndalen is a town. Strømsgodset from Drammen is a city. I think it's the sixth biggest city in Norway. So, and you understand already now that it's very important for us as a small club. Actually, I started playing for Strømsgodset in 1989, and the reason I went there instead of Mjøndalen is that it was easier to get on the team with Strømsgodset because they were down at that period and Mjøndalen were up. So it has been changing. But when the money came in Norwegian football, Mjøndalen were going down. Strømsgodset stayed up, and they were looking down at us in Mjøndalen for many years. And it has been, as a big club with a good history and culture, it's been annoying for us in Mjøndalen to be so much worse than Strømsgodset, and they have been using every single chance to put us down. That's why we were delighted in 15 to get a draw in Drammen. We lost at home, but we drew away, and it was a very proud moment. And even more proud when we beat them 3-2 at the start of this season. It was fantastic. The whole town of Mjøndalen went to Drammen to see the game, and it was probably one of the biggest victories of this town and this club. And it was, people were crying. And finally, we were able to beat Strømsgodset at their own ground at the same level. It was fantastic, and I will not talk for myself, but I think and I believe many people in Mjøndalen would like us to stay up and to get above Strømsgodset and maybe be able to be a division above them. It's going to be close, and it's very tense in this area at the moment, I have to tell you.
Yeah, let's just talk quickly about this relegation battle now, because it is close at the bottom of the table. Do you think in the last few rounds of the season, both the top and bottom of the table actually, is it more about desire, hunger, motivation, bit of bottle, who wants it more, rather than tactics and things like that?
I'm not sure actually. I think it's a lot about tactics as well. Motivation is no problem at this stage of the season. I think it's more about trying to get the players to be accepting the situation and not being afraid. I think against Strømsgodset and Sarpsborg at home, we drew, and we were kind of happy with that. We thought it was okay. Looking back at those games, I think we should gamble a little bit more to try to get a win or two. But we looked a little bit frightened against Sarpsborg. We didn't dare to attack as good as we should have. Now we know that we have to win, and it's about mentality more than motivation, at least. We as coaches have to try to get the players understand and accept and looking forward to the game, and try to find a way to influence on the game. I want them to ask for the ball. I want them to show themselves and not being hiding and being afraid, because if we are afraid, I don't think we win the game.
And just finally now, Vegard Hansen, the future. I mean, you mentioned there you've been at the club 14 years. There was a famous manager in France called Guy Roux. I don't know if you ever heard of him. He was at a club called Auxerre, and he was manager for 44 years. Sir Alex Ferguson, I think 27 years at Man United. I mean, what do you think the future holds for you? Are you going to be Mjøndalen all your life, or do you perhaps see some challenges down the line, maybe even to manage in a different country?
I've been asked this question for many years and many times, and I actually live at the stadium now. I bought an apartment behind one of the goals. I've been there for 14 years, and me and Kenneth, we have been building this club, and when I look out of my office now, I look on the other side of the pitch, and new apartments are building. The stadium is growing for every year. The club is growing. I'm very happy to be here. It's a very friendly club. I'm able to do whatever I want to do, and I now decide to go somewhere else. If as long as the club wants me, I will stay. As long as the players would like me to stay, I'll stay. If the club doesn't want me anymore, if the players want a change, then I will have to leave, and I leave without hesitation. But as long as they want me, I will stay, and I will do my best to get this club as good as possible. And I think it's possible to be mid-table of the Eliteserien, and that's my goal. It's a massive blow, actually. Kenneth Carlsen is quitting the club. He joined me the second year I was here, and he's a fantastic manager of the club, working with me for so many years. And it was a massive blow that he's leaving, but then I decided to stay here and try to continue our work alone for now. Bringing another manager in is my big goal now. So I work day and night to do as good as I can, and I'm very hopeful that we stay up. If we do, I'm very happy. If we go down, then I work even harder to get it back up into the Eliteserien with the squad we have. So and the staff we have as well. Yeah. So no, I don't look for options. Options might come someday, but I'm very happy to stay here.
Yes, I must say your stadium is actually looking a lot better these days. It's developing nicely, isn't it? If you could just get a few years of stability in the Eliteserien, I could definitely see quite a lot of progression there. But Vegard Hansen, we've taken enough of your time. Thanks very much for joining us on the Nordic Football Podcast. Delighted that you're on the show, and very best of luck.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Welcome back, and yes, that was a really interesting interview there, Steve. One thing I found, we also posted a clip from on our Twitter page, didn't we, at Nordic Footpod, and he had a lot of interesting things to say that some of it wasn't mentioned, which we've posted on our Twitter account. What were your thoughts on the general experience of talking to the Mjøndalen manager there?
Yeah, I think he's a very calm figure in a very heated, pressurised situation, and that is a club that is well and truly up for the fight and desperate to survive. But what's interesting is that how much tactical thought that he puts into things. A lot of presumption is when you're down at the bottom there, these teams just sort of lump it long or don't really have that much of a clear direction. But there's a lot of tactical intelligence there, I would say, and that really impressed me.
Yeah, really good interview. And don't forget, of course, if you haven't heard the really brilliant analysis from Steve regarding Mjøndalen and a breakdown of Mjøndalen against Bodø Glimt earlier in the season, you can still catch that on the podcast. Season 3, episode 17, we had a long discussion, and Steve did a fantastic breakdown of that. So that's kind of where it all began, and it's also on our YouTube channel, Nordic Football Podcast. So have a look at that and give it a little subscribe as well. And Steve, there was a massive game for Mjøndalen actually this weekend, wasn't there? And it's 6 points are all 6 pointers, to be honest, wasn't it? Really, as they played Ranheim at home. Tell us a little bit about that game, because it ended 3-1 to Mjøndalen. They got the win, so all things are looking rosy right now for Mjøndalen. Would you say?
I wouldn't say all things are looking rosy, but Vegard Hansen said in that clip we gave on Twitter that it pretty much was all or nothing, and I suggested to him that whoever loses the game will probably go down. So yeah, I think that may well actually seal Ranheim's fate. But in my experience, these sort of games at the bottom of the table towards the end of the season, where both teams are desperate, they're either absolutely drab 0-0s where everyone's too scared to lose, or they're just wild encounters, even involving teams that don't score a lot of goals. And that's what happened here. I mean, Ranheim actually got off to a great start. They took the lead. And I'll be honest, for quite a large amount of this game, Ranheim were possibly the better side, actually. Mjøndalen got an equaliser straight away from the penalty spot. It was 1-1 at half-time. And I think the start of the second half, it could have gone either way. It was just one of those where who's going to get the next goal? It was a crucial goal, really. And it was Mjøndalen who got it from their captain, Christian Garset, to make it 2-1. And then they got a header later on, which didn't actually surprise me. Ranheim had been conceding far too many goals from set pieces in the air recently. So I'm sure that was part of the tactical game plan of Mjøndalen as well. But yeah, real ding-dong game, chances at both ends. Ranheim will come out of that thinking, oh, we were unlucky, on another day we might have won it. But that's football, isn't it? Someone had to win it, I think, and it was Mjøndalen's time. You just feel that they can really kick on from that. And, it was a fantastic result for them. First win in 8 or 9 games, I think. And it might be enough ultimately to keep them up. They're still going to need some more points, I think. And from Ranheim's point of view, relegation looms.
Yeah, it's looking bleak for Ranheim. If you look at the table, you can see that they are rock bottom. 24 points from 28 games, minus 19 goal difference. And don't forget, there's only 2 games left in the season now, and they're 4 points from safety. Strømsgodset in 13th with a minus 10 goal difference, 28 points. So with 2 games remaining, it is really looking bleak for Ranheim. Then we have Strømsgodset and then Mjøndalen in the relegation playoff. So they have every chance of getting out of it. Maybe there's still 3 or 4 teams in that bottom. Within touching distance, really. Lillestrøm from 11th down. There's only 3 points separating 11th from 15th. So, which is automatic relegation. So there's all to play for. Lillestrøm, Tromsø, Sarpsborg, Mjøndalen, Strømsgodset, and Ranheim. Steve, we had an interesting discussion on our Twitter page where @GRoodsTop said that regardless of allegiances, there was a bit of a debate whether Strømsgodset or Ranheim would be more missed in the Eliteserien. And GRoodsTop there has said that regardless of the allegiances, the league is obviously better off with Godset. He says Ranheim are a proud side, but there's something really wrong with Norwegian football if they are in the Eliteserien. How do you respond to that, Steve? Give any defence of Ranheim there, or are you also in agreement with @GRoodsTop that Godset are the team that maybe everyone, the neutral, should want to survive?
Yeah, I think we had our good friend of the podcast, Neil Baxter, was mentioning how he was hoping that Strømsgodset would survive and that the league would be better with them in there. Look, this is an interesting question. I've been thinking long and hard about it, actually. It depends what you actually want to get out of football as a fan, as a neutral fan. Do you want to see the big clubs, the biggest clubs, the best 16 clubs in Norway in the league? Or, you look at teams like Ranheim, Mjøndalen, smaller ones that have done well in recent times. They're an example, aren't they? That just to prove that you can do it. Look at the teams trying to come up from the Obostel again. I'm sure they're a great influence in terms of motivation. What Ranheim achieved last season, I think fifth place finish with the resources they've got, it's got to serve as a great inspiration, hasn't it? And I think there's a place for that in football, in all leagues across the world, actually. Everyone likes an underdog, don't they? I guess they don't perhaps like a shit team that lingers too long. I remember back in the 90s over here, Southampton were that side, weren't they? They just seemed to survive every year, like 17th, whatever. And, Sunderland did it for a while in recent time as well, didn't they? I think there's a period where a side can kind of extend its welcome for too long in the division. So it depends which side of the coin you look from, really. If you want the big clubs to survive, then yeah, you got to cheer for like Strømsgodset, Lillestrøm, Sarpsborg, and if you want the minnows to go down, then yeah, you'd be looking at thinking Ranheim, Mjøndalen, send them packing, perhaps Tromsø as well. But I honestly, I'm often biased in certain things, but in this instance, I'm very, very neutral down at the bottom of the table. On the Nordic Football Podcast, we've interviewed someone, in fact, mostly managers from, I think, 4 of the bottom 5 now down there. And, I think they all add a lot of quality to things, John, in many different ways. So the way I see it is at the end of the season, the league table doesn't lie, and who ends up getting relegated probably deserves to go down. And I'll leave it at that, I think.
Yeah, and just to point out there, for those who may not know, I mean, if we look at the average attendance from last season, just as a reference point, Strømsgodset had the 5th highest average attendance in Eliteserien. in Norway with 5,939 average attendance, total of 89,091 fans at games. Ranheim, rock bottom of the league, in fact, lowly 2,018 average attendance and a total of 30,274 at their 15 home games. So when you look at that, that's obviously a deficit of 59,000 fans if Ranheim were to survive, I suppose, in terms of the league's potential attendances. I haven't got the figures for this season, but I imagine they'd be fairly similar. So Ranheim clearly the smaller club, but at the same time, like you say, there's sometimes there's a place for a smaller team in football. It's not all about the big boys, is it? And you have, at the end of the day, it's all on merit, isn't it? Really, Stephen. After 30 games, if you bottom of the league or you're in the bottom two, you're going down. Doesn't matter if you've got 300,000 fans in your attendance or 12 and a dog. So yeah, that's an interesting discussion there. And anyone who has any thoughts on that, don't forget you can tweet us at Nordic Footpod. Or follow us and give us a little comment there, or at GReadsTop as well. Maybe he wants to contribute to the debate there. Just looking ahead, we've got 2 more games left this season, as we've mentioned there, and this coming weekend we've got the last 2 games, as you said before, are all at the same time, aren't they? They played at kickoffs are all at the same time, and we've got down there at the bottom we've got Stabæk against Mjøndalen, Strømsgodset at home to Brann. And then we've got Ranheim Lillestrøm. So those are really quite big games, aren't they, at the bottom of the table there? I think, that particular game between Ranheim and Lillestrøm, that one could be, could give Ranheim a touching, put them within touching distance of Lillestrøm were they to win it. What are your thoughts on the final 2 games of the season, Steve? Maybe do you have a prediction for those 3 games, Ranheim Lillestrøm, Stabæk Mjøndalen, and Strømsgodset Brann?
Well, it's an interesting time, isn't it, for an international break with just 2 matches to go. I have to say, Sarpsborg and Lillestrøm, and, well, to a degree, Strømsgodset, although I might let Strømsgodset off a little bit because they were against Molde. More on that later. But they were appalling at the weekend. I mean, 2 of those sides have lost 4-0 against, Sarpsborg were playing Christiansen, who mid-table, nothing to play for, lost 4-0. I mean, that's just completely unacceptable. I've defended Sarpsborg quite a bit this year, but I can't defend that performance. And Lillestrøm, Stabæk are playing well, but they've lost home 3-1 against one of their big local rivals when they're still fighting for points. That is just not good enough. Tromsø drew 0-0 with Vålerenga, but I tell you what, they were absolutely terrible in that game. They hardly had a shot in anger. And, Vålerenga had not been very good recently. They had players missing, and it was the visitors. I mean, this match was played in -10 temperatures. It was really cold. Tromsø, I just thought, they're going to get the job done here, get themselves a win, but they were poor. So it was a great weekend for Mjøndalen. They were the only side that really benefited. And you know what? A lot of sides down there have got to pull their socks up, John, because a repeat of those sort of performances, and, they deserve to go down. I would love to see Ranheim beating Lillestrøm just to keep it close. Sides like Lillestrøm are very negative recently, and I want to see something from them in that game. I want to see them take the bull by the horns instead of trying to just eke out a draw. Sarpsborg have got 1 home match left, and I think they need to beat Haugesund, because Sarpsborg are so poor away from home. They can't rely on going into the last round of the season when they need a result on the road. So, look, it's really going to be interesting down there, and say good luck to all of the sides involved in this relegation battle. But I will say this: I was really shocked how poor certain outfits performed in the most recent round.
And what do you think about Godset against Brann? Because obviously Brann are quite high up the table, so it's a home game, and we just mentioned they have the 5th average best attendance. Godset. We've interviewed their manager in recent podcasts, but what do you think about that match?
Well, I think it all depends which version of Brann turn up, because Brann actually had a good performance on Friday night against Odd, beat them 1-0, but that was at home. They needed kind of a performance just to get the fans back on side a bit. You know what? I think Strømsgodset have a good chance of winning this game. Brann don't score many goals, so get a couple of goals, you're probably going to win the game. But Godset haven't won in quite a long time, and it's their last home match. They're going to feel the pressure, aren't they? And, a draw, is that going to do them much good? Probably not. They've got to look at this and winning the game. I say it depends which version of Brann turn up. If it's a highly motivated Brann who are really up for the fight, then it's going to be a problem because they're hard to break down. They're going to fight hard. And if the conditions are cold again, you'd rather be with probably the Brann Warriors. But I predict a home win because they've been pretty good at home under Henrik Pedersen. But as I say, it could be a difficult fixture.
Fantastic stuff. Let's take a break now. And when we come back, we're going to talk about the champions of Norway, Molde.
Her i Molde by. Olli.
Rett gjennom mot Vegard James. Her Champa først på ballen, og så det Kristoffer Haugen. I bølge nummer 2. Vegard James! Det strålende. Det ser enkelt ut. Og Molde herjer med Strømsgodset.
Her kommer Molde, og Molde, her kommer vi. Vi det vi har, tar det vi får. Vi her og hun ligger og
That was the sound of champions. Lecky James' 15th goal of the season in a 4-0 win for Molde, who beat Strømsgodset 4-0 this weekend to become officially the champions of Norway. We have champions of Sweden, Djurgården, and you can listen to that show last week when we discussed them in detail and their title win. And we now have new champions, Molde in Norway. Steve, tell us all about that game and the inevitable title win.
Yeah, congratulations to Mulder. I don't think there was any real doubt that they were going to win it this year. Certainly not in recent times anyway. But do you know what? It had actually been a while since they'd put in what you call a really, really good performance. They had some cracking displays earlier in the season. But you could tell straight away on Sunday that they were in the mood. And, I think a big thing was that Magnus Wolf Eikram came back into the team. He'd been injured for the last 3 games. He'd actually missed quite a few matches in the last sort of 10, actually. But he was back to his best. And there was this discussion I've seen on Twitter about, who's going to be player of the season in the Eliteserien and how he had tailed off in the second half of the year. But it was like he gave everyone a reminder of how good he is. And he was pulling the strings in this game. But, they were bang at it right from ball one. It didn't surprise me. I expected them to get the job done. It was just poor Strømsgodset. They just never really had a chance here. It was just a simple case of the quality was just too much for them. They knew a win would get them the title in front of their own fans, and they weren't going to be pissing around. They wanted to get the job done straight away, celebrate before the international break. And as I say, congratulations to them. It was a thoroughly emphatic victory. It could have been 5 or 6-0. And, well done to Mulder.
Yes, well done to Mulder from everyone at the Nordic Football Podcast. Steve, I have a question for you here because Mulder have racked up 62 points from their 28 games so far, with 64 goals scored and 27 conceded, plus 37 goal difference. Now, if we go back to the last few seasons, that's actually a higher total with still 2 games remaining than Rosenborg in 2017, who amassed 61 points in total, with only 57 goals scored in comparison to 64. And as I say, with 2 games remaining, Rosenborg's total last season was 64 points, with only 51 goals scored, which is 13 less. And obviously, Molde still have 2 games remaining, and if they can get 2 or more points, they will obviously eclipse that total of Rosenborg again. So, is this Molde team better than Rosenborg's title-winning team of the last 2 seasons? Or, statistically, they, in terms of points and goals scored, they are looking maybe potentially better. What's your take on that?
Good question. I think the problem is, Rosenborg were never really tested in the last couple of years that much. And Molde this year haven't really been tested too much either. It's just a case of, if you had this Molde team against, say, last year's Rosenborg team or the year before that team, I think it would have been a really close battle. It's hard to say what is the better team. I think if you look at it on paper, pound for pound, probably would be the Rosenborg side from a couple of years ago, actually, I would say. But there's no doubt about it. Is the Molde squad right now, I'm sure we'll talk about this in a few weeks' time on the end of season review for Norway. But they assembled a good squad. They used the money gained from the Erling Braut Haaland transfer pretty well, pretty wisely, and developed a squad of high quality, which this year combined very well together. The only other side on paper that had anywhere near as amount of riches was Rosenborg, but they never got out of the starting blocks or combined as well as a team this year. So, I mean, as I say, between the two sides that you're comparing, I don't think there's a lot in it. It just happened to be in separate years that they each won titles respectively.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and in terms of their scores, obviously Mulder kind of dominate the top scorer charts, to be honest, with Lecky James 15 goals, Orio Mwanfo 15 goals, Magnus Eikram 10 goals. That's 3 of the top 5 scorers in the league. Is this title been won on firepower, really? And obviously 64 goals scored is quite impressive. What do you say about their defensive side of things? And, as I say, has this title race been simply a case of really good forwards?
Oh, they've got good forwards, don't get me wrong. Magnus Eikram, Lecky James came to the party really well. Uiu Mwanfo, certainly the first half of the season especially. But I would say, firepower has been a big reason why they've won it. But squad depth and how the manager has used the squad so well. Do you remember that period in July, August Europa League matches? He was quite willing to assemble weakened 11s in the Eliteserien, and at the time there was quite a lot of people questioning him, even though results were going their way. But in the end, I think that's proved to be a masterstroke because it gave everyone enough game time and the confidence that if they came into the team, then they could perform. And I think in the past, it can be a problem with sides that are over-reliant on the same 11 or 12 players. I've been involved in team sports myself historically where that has been the case, where I remember a cricket team I was in years ago that we finished 3rd in the league twice in a row. Promotion was top 2 spots. And for the most part, we were brilliant, but we were over-reliant on sort of 4 or 5 players who, 90% of the time got the job done. But the times when we didn't get it done, then those coming to step in just couldn't perform because they were too rusty, they weren't match fit, and they weren't ready. But Mulder did not allow that situation to happen. Everyone of significance was getting enough minutes throughout the summer, and over the long course of the season, then that worked out very well. So I've got to say, well done to the manager Erling Moo for this rotation. And he's a bit of a manager no one really talks about, actually. It's reminds me a bit like Zidane at Real Madrid, where they're winning all these things, but no one was really mentioning Zidane much or giving him that much credit. And I think Erling Moo actually deserves more credit than people. I think if things had gone wrong, he would have really been slaughtered, actually. But credit where credit's due. I think his man management of the squad was very, very good, John.
Yeah, looking at some of the stats as well, I mean, Mulder have had the most touches in the box in the league this season, and they also had the most touches in the box last season. They've actually had the most touches in the box by miles this season with 716 compared to Rosenborg, 605 touches in the box, who were second. So that's obviously, a significant and higher number. And, last season they had 638 touches in the box. So clearly they're getting bodies into that box on a regular basis more than anyone else in both seasons. They've not actually had the most shots in the league, not even last season. Obviously, Valerengo had the most shots last season in the league, which might be a surprise to some. Buda Glimt are the number 1 for shots in general, not on target. This is just shots overall in the league. 398 compared to Molde's 393. Rosenborg with 392 there. there's still 2 games to go, so those statistics can clearly change. But as you've mentioned there, it seems like this is a team based on on attack. And yeah, I think you're right. Credit is due to their manager. Really, he seems to have put together a very good squad, as you've mentioned there, and their passing rate. They've got the best passing rate, the most key passes in the league. The most passes compared to any one brand in second place in terms of passing. But smart passes, Buda Glimt are actually top, but more the second. It just seems like this is a very, very good team. I mean, Steve, do you see any of their players getting picked up in the winter months? Is there any rumours around some of their bigger names? Because that's always the way in these leagues. We know the reality of the food chain we're in. Obviously, Wolf Eikeren's been in Sweden, been in America. Is there any kind of rumours around the likes of Lecky James, maybe Owie? Do you envisage any big moves, maybe, or will they be able to keep their squad and mount a Champions League push for the Champions League?
I think things can only get better for Mulder, actually, because they don't need to sell. They're not a club that needs the money. I mean, they could be potentially loaded within a year or 2. I don't know if they've got much of a sell-on clause for Brat Haaland, but I mean, just say he goes for big money, it's going to happen sooner or later, isn't it? They could be swimming in money. So the only reason they're going to lose players is obviously those who want to further their career to a better league or whatever. And I don't really see too many players I'm like, wow, he's far too good for Molde, etc., etc. I mean, the top player has been Magnus Wolf Eikeren, but he's kind of come back, hasn't he, from Malmö, Seattle Sounders, and it's worked out for him. I don't see why he would want to suddenly move on again. Lecky James, Uwe, I think we're quite happy to stay there for at least another year. You can never say never in Norwegian football. As players are always going out of the league, but that's the good thing for them. You don't look at their team and think, oh, they were over-reliant on him, and him, like Buda Glimt, for example, with Håkon Evjen, and he's obviously transferring away. But with Molde, I expect them to retain most of their squad, and with some sensible moves in the transfer market, they can become even stronger. And yes, it might be that in 2020, that they do make a run on a strong European run in the qualifiers, at least get themselves a Europa League group phase appearance. But I think they can only go from strength to strength as a club.
Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And as we say, congratulations to Mulder. A really, really good achievement there. And I think, as you've mentioned, they might be well pressed to do well in years to come. I mean, funnily enough, we just had a comment live on the show about Rosenborg, so maybe we should move on to them shortly, which I'll read out in a second. But Molde, as you've mentioned there, champions of Norway. Erling Moe, you give immense credit to, and this is the team's first title in a while. Obviously, their last title was 2014, and it's the 4th time they've won the league in their history. Just for a bit of context there, so champions in 2011. Champions in 2012, champions in 2014. Obviously, many might remember the Solskjaer era when he won some league titles. And now champions in 2019, so 4th of their history. And nice little achievement there for Mulder. Well done to all involved with the club. Steve, I'm going to move on to Rosenborg there because, as I mentioned, we've just had a tweet on air, which is a bit of a first, to be honest. You actually asked a question on our Twitter account at Nordic Foot Pod. If Rosenborg don't finish in the top 3, does Erik Horneland deserve another season, or should he be sacked? And we just had a comment from @Dauntless86 who says, "Of course he should get another season." Well, I'd like to get your thoughts on that, Steve. And for those who just before you answer that question about Rosenborg and their manager, we do have a partnership with Y-Scout. We will be at the Y-Scout Forum later this week. For anyone who hasn't seen our Y-Scout partnership, there's a recent Y-Scout blog recently published about Erling Braut Haaland, a fantastic analysis from the team and Steve about his, I think it's fair to say Erling Braut Haaland is the next big thing in world football. Incredible goal ratio. He's already scored more than 20 goals this season. I think he's racked up 5 hat-tricks, I believe, since he moved to Austria. And it really looks like he could be, on the cusp of being a 50, 60, 70, who knows, 80 million pound player. The way he's bagging goals in the Champions League. He is, of course, a Champions League top scorer, which is really incredible, really. So it looks like there's a real Norwegian talent there in the making. So yeah, you can read that blog and our analysis of why we really believe he is the real deal on that latest Y Scout blog. So yeah, have a look at that, and of course keep it tuned to the Nordic Football Podcast for any kind of breaking stories from Norway, the exciting young talents that emerge. We've been talking about Haaland for quite some time, so keep it locked. But Steve, yeah, let's talk about Rosenborg. We've had a tweet there from @Dauntless86 who says, of course, he should get another season. Are you in agreement with that? And how did they get on this weekend in what was quite a big game?
Yeah, well, I posted that tweet up when they were 2-1 down at home to Bodø/Glimt, and quite frankly, on the ropes, on the rack actually, not just on the ropes. Bodø/Glimt had them where they wanted them, 2-1 up. They were overcommitting players. You remember that analysis I did about how teams just sometimes have a far too much of a high line against Bodø/Glimt. Well, Rosenborg were actually forced into this. They're 2-1 down. They're at home. They really have to win the game to keep their medal hopes alive. And, I really think Glimt should have taken them to the cleaners. They should have taken advantage while they were on top of the game. But they didn't do it and allowed Rosenborg back into the game. Rosenborg eventually won this match 3-2, thanks to a Lundamo goal. It was the last kick of the game, literally, 95th minute, 96th minute, a shot that came off the post. And I actually think that goal might ultimately save Eirik Horneland's job. I think that is how big that goal is. Poor Bodø/Glimt, if they had just held on for a draw, they had effectively secured themselves at least third place based on goal difference and obviously a European spot for next year. So that is how significant the goal was for Bodø/Glimt. They still do one more win for Bodø/Glimt. If they beat Kristiansund in their next match, then they will still be in Europe next year on goal difference at least. But Rosenborg, I just can't believe that they got themselves out of jail there. Horneland does not deserve to stay at the club if they do not finish in the top three, in my opinion. He's had long enough to turn things around, and they're still not even got to 50 points yet, John. They've got 2 matches. They've got Viking away and they've got Ranheim at home. Well, they'll smash Ranheim at home. I'm fairly sure of that on the last day of the season. But Viking and no gimme, and they're actually lucky that Odd lost against Brann on Friday night as well. So. But it's not in their hands right now. If Odd win their last 2 games and Bodø/Glimt obviously have one more win, then Rosenborg will not be in the top 3 and not in Europe. And for me, that is just simply not good enough. He had a bad start to the year. I said they should have sacked him there and then, actually, after about 7 or 8 games. In the credit of Rosenborg's board, they had a good European run in the summer and a decent Eliteserien, I think 1 loss in about 15 games. So fair enough there. But you've also got to finish the job. And they've dropped silly points in recent weeks. Lost at Haugesund, too many draws, especially away from home. And, as I said, at the end of the season, the league table does not lie. And 4th place finish, even if it's only by 1 point, is not good enough for me at Rosenborg. I think a lot of people could have managed that team this year and certainly finished second. So, if they don't get that top 3, I would say he's not sack him.
Fair enough. As I think you've been. I remember one time I had to step into his defence because you were slamming him at one point during the season. I think it might be a fair analysis. Do you think, just very very quickly before we move on, a short answer here? Do you think they lack a striker? Because if you look at the league table and you look at every other club who's kind of up there, they all have goal scorers who are kind of in the top, upper rankings of the table, and they don't. Do you think that's something that's maybe hampered them a little bit? Just having Molde have got OE 15 goals, Bodø have got Hakon Evjen 12 goals, Odd have got Torgeir Børven, if I pronounced that correctly, with 18 goals. And then you look at Rosenborg with Söderlund on 7 goals. So there's a massive dip in terms of the numbers there. Do you think that having a good goal scorer has really hampered them this season, or not having a good one?
Yeah, Torgeir Børven there, very well pronounced, John. Now, Rosenborg, I don't think they do like a striker, actually. Obviously, they weren't helped by Niklas Bentner going AWOL this year and all that load of cobblers. But they've got strikers. They signed Bjørn Mars Johnson midway through the season. They've got Alexander Söderlund, who's a proven goal scorer. And, you know, if they really wanted to, they certainly could have played someone like Adi Benner up front or Akintola. And there's enough attacking talent, definitely. I think what they have lacked is they're not really known who to start up front. They've rotated too often. Obviously, Europe has been a factor as well. But 1 week it's been Söderlund up front. Then it's been Mars Johnson. Or they've played them both together and one of them on the wing. But the problem is, and this has been an issue with Bentner last year as well, Rosenborg have to play in the 4-3-3 formation. That's just the way they are. It's instilled into their veins. And Horneland tried to change that at the start of the year. It didn't work. He had to go to the 4-3-3, which means there's only room for one central striker. And inevitably, you're trying to put your best players in that same 11. Someone's got to play out wide when it's not their natural role, and that has let them down. Like Söderlund is not a natural right or left winger. Same with Mars Johnson. And that is their problem. They need to decide who is my main striker going forward, and stick with one of them. But you know, it's difficult when you've got so many options of the same quality. So either change your formation, which doesn't really seem like a thing you can do at Rosenborg, or make your mind up who's number one.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. And I'm just looking at some of the goals from that Bodø Glimt game. Jens Petter Hauge got 2 goals, didn't he? And really, I think it was a good game, to be fair. And, let's move on to the race for Europe, because that did have an impact on, proceedings in that sense, as you've mentioned. And if we look at it now, we've got kind of, bit of a jam up there. Rosenborg in 4th, 48 points. Odd in third, 49 points. Bodø Glimt in second, 51 points. 3 points separate them all. Bodø Glimt 19 plus goal difference. Odd +7 and Rosenborg +11. So it really is tight there with 2 games remaining. I mean, it's hard to look away from Rosenborg not snatching a Europa League place, isn't it, to be honest? But how do you see that going with 2 games remaining, Steve? I mean, from my point of view, I think it would be quite nice to see Bodø Glimt in Europe. Have Odd done enough maybe to deserve European football, do you think? Because, with 1 point to go, they're hanging in there, aren't they, maybe, with Rosenborg on their tails. Have they actually done enough to deserve it? Because, if you think about the Norwegian coefficient, you probably do want a team in there that can actually make some kind of impact in Europe, don't you? So what are your thoughts on that? Do Odd look deserving, or do you think they'll get picked?
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier in the episode that I try to remain unbiased, but I absolutely make no qualms about this. I would love to see Bodø Glimt get into the top 3, and I would love to see them finish second, actually. I think they've deserved it. So I'll be honest, when that goal went in, I was absolutely gutted for them. But maybe they can do it. In a way, maybe it can work out for them. They beat Kristiansund in their next match in front of their own fans, and that should be enough. They got I think plus 19 goal difference, and Rosenborg says +11. So surely any victory against Kristiansund would be enough. Although their last match is at Mulder away, so you can't be sure. Odd, no, for me they haven't done enough. They've been too poor away from home, too passive away from home this year. They've got a really poor road record, and I think eventually it might cost them. Odd will probably beat Tromsø at home in the next round, but their last match is at Haugesund, which is a real absolute banana skin fixture. And you could just see them slipping up, couldn't you? And Rosenborg getting into the top 3. And it would actually be good for Norwegian football as a whole if Rosenborg do get the 3rd place. I know there'll be some teams not wanting them to get in there, but if you think about coefficient and think ways going forward, they're the sort of side that can help in that way going in the future. And also, actually, if Rosenborg don't qualify for Europe, then it almost it really would help them in terms of being able to focus entirely on the league next year. And I know quite a lot of people would be quite happy not seeing Rosenborg on top of the league for 2 years in a row. So Odd or Rosenborg. Yeah, I actually hope Rosenborg do get the 3rd place. Odd for me have been disappointing at times, and I think Rosenborg will get 3rd. I think I could see Odd cocking up in that last match at Haugesund.
Fair enough. Not one for the underdog in that sense there, maybe. From my point of view, I mean, there's also the point of view, not necessarily mine, but obviously if Rosenborg don't get to Europe, then that's a bit of an impact on their finances, isn't it? Which maybe has an impact on their ability to attract players going forward. But who knows? I mean, yeah, you'd still think they'd bounce back, but it's just one thing to bear in mind if they weren't to make it. So let's see, let's see who can make it, Odd or Rosenborg, and obviously Bodø Glimt not guaranteed yet with the 3 points gap. So they've still got a bit of a job to do. Let's move on, Steve. I want to talk about 2 more teams before we wrap this podcast up. I want to talk to you about, firstly, Viking, who... Well, actually, let's talk about Lillestrøm first. I want to talk about these 2 teams briefly before we end this show. Let's start with a negative, though, and then end with a positive on Viking, maybe. But, let's move to Lillestrøm first. Let's talk with the negative first. They're one of those teams that, we talk about, maybe it's just we don't like yellow and black, but then again, we do like Bodø Glimt. So Elfsborg and Lillestrøm, in those yellow shirts of theirs, are probably the 2 least talked about teams on this podcast over the last 3 years. Aren't they really? Elfsborg have not done much. And whenever I look at Norway, I see Lillestrøm just pottering around in 10th, 11th, never really doing too much in terms of talking points. Obviously, they've had cup runs and things like that, but in terms of league form. Talk to me about Lillestrøm, Steve, because they could actually still go down. They're only 3 points out of it. And I have to say, they've been pretty inconsequential for the last few seasons, haven't they, league-wise?
Yeah, we like Bodø Glimt and Häcken, don't we? But not so much Elfsborg and Lillestrøm. You know what? They remind me a little bit of Kalmar, actually. How we said, Kalmar sort of lived on the edge for a number of years and they got away with it. And they nearly didn't get away with it this year. Got away with it in the playoff match. But Lillestrøm, it's the first, only really recently have I thought they could go down. I'll be brutally honest. I've always been quite confident they'll be fine. But they just laboured their way in the last sort of 10. Their last victory was on the 25th of August. They haven't won in the Eliteserien for any of their last 9 matches now, and their lack of goals is a huge worry in that period. They've hardly registered, a goal, and they've become very passive, become very negative. They've been playing for draws, just happy to scrape over the line. But their last 2 performances, Viking away, lost that 3-0. It's a little bit harsh. But then a home loss to Stabæk 1-3. It's very disappointing. And as I said earlier in the podcast, they really need a performance against Ranheim next up. Otherwise, they're in big trouble. I've been disappointed with how negative they've been with their approach. That's what I don't like. I will always defend any side that really has a go, fights hard and is willing to risk something in order to win the game. They're not willing to do that. And that is the disappointing part. It just feels like, apart from the cup win they had, I think 2 or 3 years ago, in the league itself, they've always been sliding. And they're just quite happy to accept mediocrity or lower mid-table mediocrity. And that is not good enough for a club like Lillestrøm. Yeah,
it's a good point. You mentioned Häcken there. So how can I forget them? Having lived in Hissingen, that's a poor one to forget them, yeah. But okay, fair enough with Lillestrøm. We'll keep an eye on them and see if they go down or if they can, get out of it. Let's end on a high note here with Viking, because they just were promoted, weren't they? They've been through their troubles over recent seasons, but I see them up there in 5th place. So, they're not going to make it into Europe. I don't think they could still mathematically make it with 6 points behind Odd. But realistically, it's probably not going to happen for them in terms of Europe. But a creditable season, it seems, and they look pretty much guaranteed top 7 and could end anywhere between sort of, like I say, 3rd or 7th. So tell us about Viking season and, what's been the secret behind their revival.
Yeah, I mean, they can still make Europe by winning the Norwegian Cup against Haugesund. So that is their route into Europe. But yeah, they've really... I'm not going to say overachieved, because I think a lot of their results have been fair. They've not been particularly lucky or anything. But compared to what was expected, I mean, no one thought they'd be this high. And, I still look at their squad on paper and I'm like, how have they managed to do this? Because, there's not been too many new additions from from what was the Obos Ligaen side that won that title. That it's not like Arlesund this year who've run away with the league. There were weaknesses in that Viking team last year, defensively especially. The goalkeeper, Ivan Usbo, has had a career year, really. It's just, historically, whenever I've seen him, he was absolutely crap. Sort of keeper, you just expect mistakes to happen all the time, Like Liverpool had that probably Ming Millionaire, or what was he called? He ended up in Turkey. I forget what they call him now. But you just expected mistakes to happen. But he's been really good. And in fact, he will be a candidate for the goalkeeper of the year season, actually, in the Eliteserien. And the defence has been much stronger than expected despite injuries. I can't put my finger on it. I think it's just a case of certain players. Sometimes when you move up a level, players respond and just raise their game, don't they? And I think that's been an example. Added a good signing in mid-season, Christopher Luckberg from Brann. He wasn't doing anything at Brann, but he's a really good player for them. And, players like Trippic has been one of the best players in the whole league. Just overall, I think players have raised it. Youngsters have emerged like Christian Torstvedt. And, of course, they've had a bit of luck in games. But what I like about Viking, especially at home, is they take the game to the opposition. They're fearless. They're playing without any fear. Confidence comes from that. And I think as soon as they knew they were not in any danger of relegation, they just built even stronger. And that's what's happened, is a nice top 6-7 position in a cup final. And credit to the manager. I think a lot of people, no one expected them to be as strong as they are.
Fantastic stuff. Well done to Viking, and could do better for Lillestrøm there. Molde are the champions of Norway. Djurgården are the champions of Sweden. We're not going to talk about Sweden this week. If you want to listen to our analysis of the Swedish league and the incredible end to the season with Djurgården winning the title, tune into our last podcast. Go back. Go on iTunes. Go on Spotify. Go on Libsyn. Go wherever you go to get our show. YouTube. Please subscribe and let people know about the podcast if you enjoy it. Obviously, we survive on your kind of feedback and praise, or criticism at times. And we'd love to hear from you. So obviously give us a tweet as well at Nordic Foot Pod. Because, as I say, we want to keep growing, and it's great to have any feedback in terms of likes and subscribes. I think that's pretty much it for this show. We've talked about Norway. This is an all Norway podcast, and it is the place to be for Norwegian football and Swedish football in general. But Steve, it's been great to talk to you, and also a really interesting interview there with yet another manager in the bag. Well done. And we'll talk to you in the coming weeks. We've still got a few more shows this season with reviews of the season to come of Sweden and Norway. And of course, we'll be talking about the winter, the potential transfers and that kind of thing. I also want to just end it very quickly by saying congratulations to Umeå, who have been promoted to the Superettan. So congratulations there. It's a place I visited quite recently. And they have a very nice football club, actually. So well done to them. Promotion for the first time in many years. To the second tier of Swedish football. We'll be keeping an eye on them next season. Steve, anything left? Any closing comments, or is that it for this week?
No, that pretty much sums things up. And thanks for listening, everyone. Big thanks again to Vegard Hansen as a great guest on the show. And we will see you all again very soon. Goodbye.